Okay, we are going to try this again. I still can't get anybody to help me with recording on the PowerPoint, so we're going to have to do this again. I'm begging people to help me. That's okay. Let's at least do it this way, and that way we can talk about imperialism. Today what we're talking about is America becoming imperialist power. And if you'll notice, I got this from my cohort, Miss Susan Poyer up in New York. I've added some things to it and taken some things off that she put up there, but it all started with what she gave me. But anyhow, period 7 is where we are. This is one of the parts of us, the global conflicts. The big thing I want you to get out of this is the fact that America starts to spread out. Here's a country that wanted to be their own country, broke away from England, which was the imperial power of the 1700s, and now we're doing the exact same things to other countries that we fought to get away from. We're going to take over Guam, Puerto Rico, dealings with Cuba, Hawaii. Same things that we were fighting against Great Britain for, we're going to be doing some of the similar things, not the exact same things. But it does show how we debate over it. Not everybody wanted to do it, but you know, the powers that be, the military, the political forces wanted to, and then of course how that's going to be have our effect on international dealings. So why did America join the imperialist club at the end of the 19th century, in 1800s, going into the 1900s? So there are going to be several different reasons we're going to talk about. One, it's all about money. Foreign investment, 1869 to 1908. If you look in 1869, how small this graph is in millions, and then of course 1897. And if you look just 10, 11 years later, look at the percentage of that, because what happens is we go into places like Puerto Rico, we go into places like Cuba and Hawaii and do things there. We start building businesses there. We begin to trade with other people. We want to be an isolationist country. In other words, we don't want people to come and tell us what to do, but we do want to trade with others. That opens up tremendously, not just the same old European countries that we have traded with in the past. So if you look at this, it shows you how our exports, you look at that, based from 1870, right after the Civil War, and then you go, 50 years later basically, and look at the increase of that. Not only are we exporting more, but we're importing more, because other countries, even at that time, have cheaper labor than what we have. And that's the amazing thing. There's things that we still look at today. Cheap labor from China makes our products cheaper. We had this way back in the day. All right? Other reason are military strategy interest. So look at this. This is the big thing. All these islands, Philippines, Guam, Midway, the American Samoa, that's where Coach Poyer is from, Hawaii, all those are going to be huge. One, for trade. Things that they have that we want, being able to sell them things, but also the military strategy. One of the things we want to do is trade with Japan and eventually China. Now, back in the day, you're on a wooden ship with sails. So as long as you had the wind, you could get back over to the United States. What's going to start happening? We're converting to steamships, powered by steam, which is heated by coal. You're not going to be able to have enough coal on that ship to go from here to here. So you need something along the way, Midway, Wake, Hawaii, that we can put coal in. And then those ships can resupply and then make it the rest of the way to the United States. That is going to be a huge thing. Also, as far as a protectorate, as we're going to see later on with World War II, all those things are going to help us with that. Now, the guy who comes up with this idea of the Navy being strong and being able to do these things is Alfred T. Mahan. And he writes this book called The Influence of Sea Power on History. And if you look, he goes all the way back to the 1660s to 1783. So you may think, well, why does anybody worry about that? It's a book that's old. Well, if we think about our world history, the countries that were the most powerful always had a great navy. You go all the way back to Greece. Greece had a great navy. If you go back to Rome, Rome had their army was better than their navy, but still pretty good. But think back to the Spanish Armada and how much Spain was able to increase. And then, of course, when Great Britain overthrows the Armada, they're able to do it because of their navy. And so one of the things he does is he talks about how much the navy would be important to our country. So there's Alfred Thayer Mahan, and talks about naval power was necessary to acquire markets overseas and then to protect them once you get them. You can't take over these countries without the navy. They're islands. You got to have a navy. Doesn't have to make any difference if you have a great army that's over here. If your navy can't get over here and get on a beachhead, it doesn't help you. So finally, America passes the Naval Act of 1900, which expands the United States Navy. And keep in mind, after the Civil War, or during the Civil War, the United States Navy was great. That was one of the positives it had over the Confederacy. But after the war, they let it go into disrepair because they're not fighting anybody. And then this is going to take place. So they start building it up. They turn more to those ships made out of metal, like I say, the coal power instead of the wind power, huge guns on top of them and stuff like that. It's going to be really good. The other thing we'll have is social Darwinism. So we think about the hierarchy of race. Which race is better than other races? And one of the things you look at is even inside a certain race, if you are pure-blooded, half-blooded, all those things are going to take place. And of course, white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, WASP, are going to think they're better than all of these. That Caucasian is going to be in the middle. And they're going to think they're better than all of these other folks. Which is going to lead us to what we call the white man's burden. And what happens as America goes around taking over these countries, they start to say it is our duty, a little bit like the Spanish explorers. Think about that. When the conquistadors came over and they brought the missionaries with them, and they said it's our duty to introduce them to Christianity. And that's going to be what we're going to look at. Similar to Native Americans, it is our duty to take them over, teach them the right way, make them stop being heathens, give them an education, put clothes on them, teach them how to act the right way. White Anglo-Saxon Protestants of America have been doing this for years and years. So if you look at this, this is, it could be Teddy Roosevelt, but it's certainly a United States soldier. He's got the native here in him, and he is taking you up the hill. This is a schoolhouse. And so, of course, he is going, not of his own free will, he is forcing him to go up to school and get an education. So, the guy who comes up with the term white man's burden is Rudyard Kipling from the Jungle Book. He is a British guy, and it's a poem he writes. Now, this is just the first part of the poem. It says, "Take up the white man's burden, send forth the best ye breed. Go send your sons to exile to serve your captives' need. To wait in heavy harness on fluttered folk and wild, your new caught sullen peoples, half devil and half child." Now, what he is saying is America now is doing what Great Britain has done for years. And he's kind of defending white man's burden. He's British, defending what they've done for years. And what he is now saying is that you are grabbing people that are half devil and half child and trying to educate them. So, social Darwinism at this point is just like survival of the fittest individuals, it is the survival of the fittest of nations. And of course, as we said, the Anglo-Saxons feel that God has said they should be the keeper of their brother. They look at these natives, just like they did Native Americans, just like they did the original Latinos. They're the people we need to take, educate, Christianize. And if you look, this is a political cartoon. It didn't come out the greatest in the world, but it says, white man's, I think it is white man's burden at the bottom. But anyhow, you got the British guy here probably the Prime Minister. Here's Uncle Sam. And what they're doing is they're climbing up the mountain, and all these rocks have names of places that they've overtaken, like the Philippines, Cuba, Puerto Rico. And what they're doing is they're taking the people, the natives of that time, and having to carry them up to civilization. And of course, they're saying, this political cartoon says, it's not an easy path. It's rocky, hilly, hard to do, but it's something that those powers that be must do because God has told them to do it. There's your missionaries, of course. That's another reason, as we said, very similar to the conquistadors. American missionaries in China right here. And if you look, their job is to come and to teach them Christianity. But what they're doing is they're using them as servants almost. Now, these people don't look unhappy right here. That may be kind of their job. I don't know. Like rickshaw people would carry the rickshaw. But, and this is in China, but this here could be down in the Latin Americans. But it is they look at it as the conversion of the heathens, the inferior races. And if you look at it, it's Uncle Sam. It could be a German. That's a German. Could be Spain. All these European countries in America are trying to get in on this colonization. The other thing we look at is that now that we have settled, quote unquote, settled all these lands, we now have no new frontier to go to. And America has been built on going and finding new lands, even though we hadn't been using all the land we had. But now we have conquered for the most part all this new land over here in the West. And so now people like Teddy Roosevelt, Henry Cabot Lodge, look at American expansion, going to these islands, as the new frontier now. If you think about today, in the 60s, what was the new frontier? Time's up, outer space. So America has always felt that they need to go out further and get more land, new adventures and things. So we're going to talk about Hawaii. How does Hawaii get to be part of the United States? It is not an easy thing. It's not where back in the turn of the century Hawaii wanted to be a part of the United States. That is not true. So, of course, one of the first things we're going to try to do, and this is in the early 1800s, is to convert Hawaiians to Christianity. That's going to be a big thing. Keep in mind now, Hawaii has its own government at the time. It has somewhat of an industry. It has an economy for sure. But we're going to come in, of course, what America's always great at is, let's show you how to do it better. Our view of Hawaiians is that they are kind of backwoods, heathenist, grossly immoral, a scandalous government, not very well educated. We have held them up, okay, because our business interests come in there. And really, when the U.S. business interests come in, that's what gets the economy really rolling for Hawaii. So Hawaii becomes a U.S. protectorate in 1849 by virtue of just economic treaties. It's kind of a quid pro quo. We'll see that again in a second. But what we want to do is Hawaii offers things that we can't do for ourselves. The big thing in all of this, just so you know, sugar plantations. That's going to be huge in all of these islands. Very similar to before even colonization here in America when we had the sugar plantations off the coast of Africa. So here are the purposes of Hawaii. Certainly missionaries. It is a port for whaling ships and merchant ships, as I mentioned. Even though they had sails back then, it was a place for them to go and get fresh water, fresh food. Trust me, you get tired of eating fish when you're out in the ocean. Sugarcane plantations, and then we eventually see this, not in the early 1820s and 40s, but we eventually see this as this could be that naval seaport for refueling with coal. So what takes place, as I said, they have their own government, and then eventually the one monarch that is kind of the center of all of it is Queen Lulukalani. And say that 3 times fast and see how you do. But she is not the type of person that's like, oh yes, we want America to come in and take over. That is the furthest thing from the truth. They believe that what they have going on is great. They're okay with the economic treaties and want to do things that way. America, you do your own thing, don't bother us. But what starts to happen is the businessmen that are in Hawaii, American businessmen, want to go against her. They kind of lead an overthrow with some rebels. So now you have a kind of mini civil war in Hawaii. You got the ones who are for Lulukalani, and then the ones who are for the business people. And of course the business people have most of the money during this time period. So in 1875, just to back up a little bit, we established a reciprocity treaty with Hawaii. Now, we protect it, but it's not really ours. But what we say is that if you let us protect you, kind of run some things, we will sign this duty-free agreement, which means you don't have to pay tariffs on our stuff, and we don't pay tariffs on your stuff. And that way everybody's happy. But we did that because we knew that our business ventures were down there. All right? Later on, 1890, President McKinley's, this is when McKinley was in Congress, the McKinley tariff is going to do a 50% tariff. And think about that. If something comes in and it's $100, lo and behold, now it's going to be $150. So that is not good. That is not good at all. But what they're trying to do on this is they are trying to get Hawaii to let them take over more. But it's a quid pro quo. And so what they do is if you do the things we want you to do, then we'll overlook this tariff. And most people are going to do that. The other thing it does, though, is with some other countries, they're going to start wanting to have that same quid pro quo. So now, 1893 is when the American businessmen back an uprising against the present government of Hawaii. And then finally what happens, Sanford Ballard Dole proclaims the Republic of Hawaii, kind of leads that insurrection, that coup d'etat against Lulukalani. And then, of course, comes in and runs it as his president until it's annexed. So here we see the Hawaiian annexation ceremony in 1898. And there is Dole, same guy, standing there. And of course, he's going to be a person of power in the time. And then America looks at, if you look here, this is Lulukalani right here. And then this is Dole, and it's showing that is who America is supporting. President McKinley felt it was America's manifest destiny to possess the island. Congress and the people realized how valuable Pearl Harbor would be to the Navy. Think about this. In the 1900s, we realized how important Pearl Harbor is going to be in the Pacific. And of course, that's going to come to a deadly height in 1941 with World War II. So we also have a situation in Japan. Now, we're not going to try to take over Japan, but we do want to open up trade agreements with Japan. All this is coming on the west coast of things. And so what happens is Matthew Perry, not a guy from Friends, a different Matthew Perry, he comes in, and now here's what he does. He comes in and makes some agreements with Japan. But here's what he does. When he does that, he's got these powerful big ships, bigger than anything the Japanese have seen. So it's a little bit of intimidation. And he comes in and they do sign some agreements and stuff. Of course, the Japanese are concerned there might be an invasion. That doesn't come to fruition. But if you look, this is how the Japanese looked at Commodore Perry. Not a very favorable painting of him. 1854, we signed the Treaty of Tanagawa. That's in Tokyo. And of course, basically what it does, opens the ports of Shimoda and Hakata to American trading and permits the establishment of a U.S. consulate. Now that's important. It's kind of like an embassy. Japan had never allowed outside countries to come in and do that. But you have that embassy there so that if things go wrong, you can go and see that person and stuff. That's kind of like the president's representative. So this is all about the Japanese agreement. The Japanese note agreeing to deny passports to laborers in the U.S. Japan recognized the U.S. right to exclude Japanese immigrants. So what we're doing, we're adding the Japanese to the Chinese Exclusion Act. If we don't want them in, we don't have to let them in. And then look at this. The U.S. government got the school board of San Francisco to rescind the order to segregate Asians in separate schools. Interesting. But if you look at it, of course, in America we have a hard time, just like with the Chinese Exclusion Act. Japs keep moving. This is a white man's neighborhood. Now this is going to be a little bit later, but there's always been a resentment to the Japanese because very similar to the Chinese, they come in, they work hard, they do their job, and to some whites of the time, they feel threatened. So, keep that same thing in mind with the Chinese Exclusion Act. And of course, this is the Root Takahari Agreement that does this. Here's what it is, okay? Recognition of the territorial status quo as of November 1908. What it's basically going to do is establish an open door policy in China. So we're getting into China here. We got Japan. We got the Philippines. What we're trying to do is get all these Asian countries to open up their trade ports to us. Now, America at the time, we don't want to be hypocrites like we are today. We've been that throughout history. But if you look here, we're going to allow China to annex Korea and southern Manchuria. For that, they're going to help us limit Japanese immigrants coming in. So what we're going to do, think about this. In America, we're going to allow another country to invade Korea, invade southern Manchuria, turn the other way, look the other way, as long as we have that quid pro quo of you helping us with trade ports and stopping Japanese immigration. Not a good thing. All right, the Lodge corollary to the Monroe Doctrine. Henry Cabot Lodge is a big guy believing in imperialism. And he said that non-European powers, like Japan, would be excluded from owning territory in the Western Hemisphere. So keep in mind, the Monroe Doctrine was directed at European powers. And it said European powers couldn't come in. Now, the Lodge corollary is going to add other countries. Japan, China, all those. You can't come in either. So we're going to extend that. Now, Alaska, which is one of the states, 50th state, was actually purchased from Russia. So we didn't invade that, we purchased it. $7.2 million from Russia, 1867. Now, if you look, think about this, 1867, Civil War's only been over with a couple of years. This is Secretary of State Seward. Think about this, Abraham Lincoln's assassination, 3 guys are targeted, Abraham Lincoln, Andrew Johnson, and then Seward. Seward was the Secretary of State for Lincoln. He is the guy that was laying in bed, and the guy came in and tried to stab him in the neck with a knife. So he survives, and he's the guy that could see Alaska is going to be a good thing. Now, we call it Seward's folly because at the time, people did not think so. They did not think so at all. But he said, I think there's something there. One is land. That's a great thing. There's land there. But there's also going to be some other things. Now, probably at the time, he's thinking timber, fish, furs. At the time, he's not seeing oil, but that's going to be a huge thing later on. So he does see that Alaska will provide land and resources for America down the road. They called it, no one, it's not very popular. They call it Seward's Folly, Seward's Icebox. Okay, preparing for the heated term, the big thing. So people made fun of him all the time about it. But he stuck to his guns and said this this piece of land is going to help us. So Cuba, all right, how do we, don't take over Cuba, how do we develop our relationship with Cuba? Keep in mind, back in the day, before Fidel Castro takes over, Cuba and the United States had a pretty good working relationship. But how did we get there? Cuba at the time was controlled by Spain. Cuba, all those islands like the Philippines in the Pacific, Spain had a lot to do with. So that's who we're going to have to go to war with. Now, our president at the time is going to be McKinley, William McKinley, who was originally opposed to going to war with Spain. I think your reading even said he had fought in the Civil War, so he did not want to see bloodshed again. He actually tries to work with Spain on some things, doesn't work, so he says, all right, let's go to war with them. If you look at this political cartoon, and what it does is it talks about here, he is the tailor, he is sizing the government up. And if you notice here, it's not the slim Uncle Sam we usually see. It is the fat Uncle Sam. He has expanded. No jokes. No jokes. He has expanded. And so he's expanded because he's taken over different countries. And if you look at here, you can see Louisiana Purchase, Alaska, California, Hawaii. So on his pants, he has different things that we have taken over the years. And of course, McKinley is sizing him up to take over more. If you look at this one, you got Samoan Islands, Guam, Philippines, Puerto Rico, Alaska. These are ones that we've already taken, and now these are ones that he is sizing him up to build maybe a new coat or something. And if you look, Cuba is right here off the coast of Florida. It is only 90 miles away. 90 miles away from Florida. That's why when people have escaped Cuba, they've got on boats and stuff and try to flee over to Miami. All right, once again, it is all about the sugar plantations of the time. All about the sugar plantations. And so what's happening, America owned most of the sugar plantations. We have other investments that's going to happen. Now, I put this up here because I find it very interesting. After everything is done, Coca-Cola goes down to Cuba because of the sugar down there. If you've ever had that real Coke, they come out with it every now and then, that has real sugar, oh, it's horrible, but that's how it used to be made. And so what they did is they actually built a manufacturing plant down in Cuba in 1906 and started bottling Coca-Cola down there. And of course, what happens is when Fidel Castro comes in, later on in the 1960s, he is going to kick out all the U.S. businesses, including Coke. They kind of run before he kicks them out. There are two places in the world that you cannot buy Coca-Cola. One is Cuba. The other one is North Korea. Everywhere else in the world, you can buy Coca-Cola. But at any rate, we have all these sugar plantations down in Cuba. And what takes place is Spain has a tight fist around it, what can be done, what can't be done. The rebellion takes place, and one of the things that the rebels do, which is pretty smart, is instead of just fighting the Spaniards, what they start to do is burning these U.S. sugar plantations. You may say, well, why would they do that? That's an American company. They knew that the business people, Americans, would complain to the U.S. government, who would then say, we need to come down and fix it. And so the way to fix it is to actually give the rebels what they want, which is their independence, and fight Spain for it. So that's going to be how all that takes place. So one of the things that's taken place, and it happens today, is, this is the Spanish people, this is the misrule by Spain. And what happens is the Cuban people, from time to time, have gone out of the pan into the fire. And if you look at Fidel Castro and how people were upset with his rule, once again, it's another one of those things where when he leads the rebellion, he's going to tell people, here's what we're going to do. It's going to be so much better for you. But then as time goes on, people realize we're in no better shape than we were originally. Now, Spain says, okay, what are we going to do about the rebellion? And so they had this idea, which maybe it's a good idea, I don't know. But you got rebels, and keep in mind, think back to the American Revolution. You got patriots, and then people who are kind of on the fence post. So one of the goals of these rebels is to convince the fence post people to join the rebellion. So what they do is they send this guy Weller down. I think he's a general. I think they're on the next. Yep, general. He's a general. And they send him down. What they want him to do is to segregate the hardcore rebels from the common people of Cuba, so they can't convince them. So what he does is he takes the general citizenry, these fence post people, and puts them in concentration camps. They call it reconcentration policy. What they're doing is trying to segregate the people. But what happens is you've now jailed, confined the people who've done nothing against you. Unfortunately, there are going to be diseases, malnutrition, brutality in there, and as you look, the people are going to starve to death. Diseases are going to kill them, and they don't do anything for them. I mean, they treat them like prisoners. So he does this both in Cuba and in the Philippines. He's known as the Butcher Weller, and now this is part of yellow journalistic material. We'll talk about this in a little bit, where the American newspapers start being a little bit of early fake news. Now, this is terrible, no doubt about it. However, even before we get to this point, they start talking about how bad these reconcentration camps are. But they put the Cuban civilians in camps to isolate them from the rebels. Disease, malnutrition leads to death. Look at that, 225,000 men, women, and children who had not done anything against your government. That's a bad plan right there. And of course, eventually, they recall him. They send him back to Spain. Spain really kind of was out of touch with what was going on. So all this had taken place. Finally, word gets back to Spain. And they're like, oh my gosh, we didn't know this was going on. So they recall the guy. But the damage had been done. So speaking of yellow journalism, what has taken place in Cuba, and especially during the Spanish-American War, is the people of America, not like the Revolution or the Civil War, there you can see what's taking place. You can kind of make a decision on your own. But in the Spanish-American War, the American people didn't see it. They're going by newspapers. And of course, the newspapers are being very competitive. And the way you're competitive, just like today with news stations, you may have to add a little something to it. So these two guys, Joseph Pulitzer, who of course the Pulitzer Prize is going to be named after, and William Randolph Hearst, two big-time newspaper owners, editors, are vying to see who will buy more of their papers. And that's them there. Okay? And they call it yellow journalism, one, because that was the paper that it was written on. But here's what they do. Like Hearst told one of his reporters, you furnish the pictures and I'll furnish the war. I'll make up the story. So you bring me a picture and I'll make up the story that goes with it. So of course, none of this would be considered primary sources. None of it. All right? And then of course, jingoism is going to make its appearance during this time, and that is an extreme nationalism. And America becomes jingoism, where we think Americans are the only ones that know how to do anything. So when you see that word, that's what it means. It is extreme nationalism. Now, another thing that's taken place, I know I'm kind of skipping around a little bit with some of this stuff, but how do we get involved? First of all, McKinley does not want to get involved, even though we're getting all these things even before we go to war with Spain down in Cuba. It's making the newspapers of what's taking place. Things like this are making it to the newspaper. McKinley is steadily trying to work with Cuba. Steadily trying to work with Cuba. But finally, something's going to really grate his nerves. One, this guy here, DeLong, he is like the ambassador to the United States. He is the ambassador to the United States of Spain. And what he does is he writes a letter and he talks about how weak McKinley is and that nobody likes him and that he may not get reelected, so why do business with him? So if you look, criticize President McKinley as weak and a bidder for the admiration of the crowd. He is trying to be popular. Besides being a would-be politician who tries to leave a door open behind himself, doesn't want to get painted in a corner, so he doesn't want to give ultimatums, while keeping on good terms with the jingos of his party, the extreme nationalists, who want to go down and kick butt in Cuba. Nationalists always want to fight. Of course, Roosevelt, Theodore Roosevelt, he's popular at the time, but he's not president or anything like that. He's the Assistant Secretary of the Navy. He doesn't like the fact that McKinley is not going down there. Of course, now, he's one of those guys, we've built up the Navy, we've made it huge, we've got to show what it can do. Military people can be like that. We've got all these toys. Show us what we can do with them. And so he wants to go to war. He's an imperialist, he's a nationalist, and look at this, he says that McKinley has the backbone of a chocolate eclair. And yes, I've eaten chocolate eclairs before. One time a student brought chocolate eclairs for everyone, and I ate them all. You know the story, right? So he resigns his position as the Assistant Secretary of the Navy to actually go and fight in Cuba once we declare war on Spain, which is going to lead us to the Rough Riders. This is the group. There's Teddy right there. These are the Rough Riders, and they're going to lead a famous charge up San Juan Hill and defeat the Spaniards. Keep in mind, we're not fighting Cubans, we're fighting Spaniards in Cuba. This is an example of propaganda right here. Because even though they were a cavalry unit, the horses had not arrived. So they actually charged up the hill on right foot, left foot. But McKinley had asked for concessions. He had tried to negotiate, didn't work. Finally, he gets Congress to pass a declaration of war. Now, one of the things that leads to this, takes place around this time, is the sinking of the Maine. The Maine was a battleship right here. It was in Havana Harbor. And one night, it explodes right about here. And of course, we assume that Spain had sent out mines to blow it up. And so it becomes a battle cry, much like remember the Alamo during the Civil War, remember Fredericksburg. Here we go, remember the Maine and to hell with Spain. We're going to go fight them now. And they blame Spain. If you look here at this political cartoon, the gorilla is Spain. Maine seller murdered by Spain, unsuspecting really at the time. War had not been full-fledged at the time. Here we're going to have funeral for the Maine victims in Havana. That's where it takes place, Havana Harbor. What we later find out is it was probably not a mine. Later on, they've done research of the Maine. If it had been a mine, the explosion would have gone from the outside in to the Maine. They've now looked at the side of the ship, and the explosion has gone out. Probably what happened is this boiler here was next to ammunition, and it got too hot. And either the boiler exploded or the ammunition exploded, and that's what really caused it. So it wasn't like the main cause of the war, but it's one of those things, kind of like a Boston Massacre type deal. We need something. We have all the things leading up to it, but this is kind of like the big spark that takes place. So one of the things that happens is we call the Spanish-American War that splendid little war because, to be honest, not a ton of people died. Now, people died, don't get me wrong, but it's not like the Civil War, the Revolutionary War, not even like the Mexican-American War. And the big thing is we are just so much better, America, naval-wise. Army's going to take a little while to get going. The Navy's huge. We just destroyed the Spanish Navy. And then the Army gets better. It's not quite ready at the beginning, but it gets better. But we're going to go in and it's just going to be a decimation. America kills Spain, both here in Cuba and then over in the Philippines. So how prepared was the U.S. for war? Well, with the Navy it was. The Army not so much. But when you're dealing with water, islands, the Navy is the key. Finally, the Spanish-American War stops with the Treaty of Paris, another Treaty of Paris, and then there's another depiction of the explosion of the Maine in Havana Harbor. So, as this is taking place over in the Philippines, we're fighting the Spanish there too. Commander Dewey is the guy that's in charge of the Navy, and basically he goes into Manila Bay and defeats the Spanish Navy. Now, a little bit different here in the Philippines. The Filipinos, that's what you call people in the Philippines, the Filipino rebels actually want to be their own country, and they don't want America there. We want to be there. We need those islands. And so we kind of fight the we do. We fight the Filipino resistance. So you really got three people fighting each other. The Spanish are being fought by the Filipinos and America, and then America and the Filipinos are going to fight. So if you look here, Dewey smashes Spain's fleet. Once again, we've gone to steamships, coal, they're faster. The Spanish ships are the old kind, they're decrepit, and we're able to just blow Spain away. So European countries and people in America begin to think, is McKinley becoming a despot? Now, what's a despot? It's like an emperor, it's like a tyrant, someone that has complete control. And if you look, you've got McKinley, this is the Philippines, and he's got a foot on a Native American's neck. And so what's happening is we give the pretense that we are there to help the natives of all these different little islands. But yet, especially in the Philippines, when we fight those natives, it shows that we may have some other motives behind it. And people take note. Of course, you got Napoleon and you got Caesar looking on and saying, wow, we did the same thing and we got a bad rap for it. So if you look here, this, of course, is the leader of the Filipino uprising, Emilio Aguinaldo. I hope I say that right. But look at this. Way more than what takes place in Cuba. By the time they fight Spain and they fight America, 200,000 Filipinos are killed. And we basically take over the country. Now, in 1946, after World War II, we do give the Philippines their independence, but we are still a presence there in the Philippines. Okay? So if you look here, a game that loses much to win little. And if you look at it, we've got the American soldiers here, and then there's Aguinaldo with his army being decimated and stuff. All right? So early on, we're going to put someone in charge of the Philippines. And the first person we put there, we make him Governor General, is William H. Taft, who is later on going to be president after Teddy Roosevelt. He is a great administrator. He does try to get along with the Filipinos. But once again, anytime you talk to a Philippine person, they're going to have relatives that were killed by your government. This is a pretty important political cartoon. It's called The Sphere of Influence. So you have America here with the eagle, which is our symbol, but if you look, the wings go out all the way from the Philippines to Panama, Cuba, so it shows that we are now becoming imperialistic, and we have taken over that. So think back to countries that got a bad rap for that back in the day. Great Britain, Japan, Germany at one time. And a lot of these European countries are still imperialistic countries, but mainly in Africa. So, what takes place with the Treaty of Paris? I mentioned that a moment ago. So here's what takes place. Cuba is freed from Spanish rule, so Cuba is free. Spain has to give America Puerto Rico and the island of Guam. That is why they are territories of America today. It goes all the way back to the turn of the century. The U.S. pays Spain $20 million for all of the Philippines. So at least Spain feels like it gets something out of the deal. $20 million. That's more than what it is today. But for an entire country of islands, that's not a lot. But that's the Treaty of Paris. Now, there are going to be some caveats to that. I'll talk about them in a minute. The U.S. becomes an imperial power now because this is the first time we've taken over countries outside of our continental area. So there is going to be an anti-imperialist league, a group of people who say what we're doing is just wrong. It's just wrong. Mark Twain, Andrew Carnegie, William James, William Jennings Bryan are people who say what we're doing is wrong. We fought to stop stuff like this. They did not want the annexation of the Philippines and all those other acts of imperialism. And they said we should not try to incorporate more non-white people. Now you can look at this one of two ways. They may say, well, it is not our duty to try to make these people of color into the white culture. You can look at it like that. The Senate could also say, maybe these folks don't want non-white people to be a part of the United States. You could look at it either way. You can make an argument one way or the other. And then, of course, here, this would go with that second part. Union leaders didn't want it because it would bring in cheap labor. If you're going to be protected of those islands, just like today, if you're from Puerto Rico, come on in. You can come in easily. They were worried about taking jobs away from white Americans. And of course, that's going to hurt the labor cost and all that stuff. So you can make an argument either way. That might be a quiz one day. You never know. Well, here's the thing we're going to add to it. First of all, people are worried that we're going to take over Cuba. The Cubans don't want it and we don't want it. So we passed what's called the Teller Amendment. And what it says is the United States could never annex Cuba. Now, we can control it to some degree. We'll talk about that. We can help Cuba. We can help Cuba gain its independence. We're going to withdraw our troops, sort of, kind of. We'll talk about that. But we're there to help Cuba. But we will never take it over. That's why today we're not there to take over Cuba. Now, the Platt Amendment says this. And what we do is we make them put this in their Constitution when they become their country. They could not go into any agreements with foreign powers that would endanger its independence. Now, of course, this has been broken. Can you tell me how? Of course, with the Cuban Missile Crisis. When Fidel Castro comes in, he does not observe any of this. He goes against the Constitution and brings in Russia. But at the time, what we're trying to do is to let Cuba be its own independent country. The U.S. could intervene, if necessary, to maintain it and help keep that independent government. And keep in mind what we're trying to, what we try to do from time to time is side with different people. And of course, the problem is when Fidel Castro takes over, he sides with Russia and not with the United States. Now, the one little bit that we didn't have to withdraw from, it's part of Cuba. It's called Guantanamo Bay. We have Marines there today. We have Navy. This is where we have the big prison for terrorists. But it is there. It's a coaling station. But today we keep it there. We have to pay rent every year to Cuba for it. And it's part of the agreement. And of course, now you may say, well, why didn't Fidel Castro try to take it over? Because Fidel knew we would blow him out of the water. Because we were that strong in that port. We're not going to give that up. And then, of course, Cuba must not build up a excessive public debt. We, according to this, could go in and tell them, here's what you need to do to keep your debt down. We don't do that anymore because look at our debt. That'd be the vein of hypocrisy. So, did U.S. citizenship follow the flag? Puerto Rico. Okay, we get Puerto Rico from Spain, becomes an unincorporated territory. You are still a citizen of the Puerto Rico, not of the United States, even though you can come and go very easily. There's been talk of Puerto Rico becoming a state. Many people in Puerto Rico do not want to do that because then you would have to go by the laws of the United States. And one of the things you want to do is have the goodies of the United States without having to do the laws of the United States. Okay? The insular cases, constitutional rights were not automatically extended to territorial possessions. So back in the day, they could not go by our Constitution. They had to come up with their own. Today, we kind of let that happen if people from there come over. They have our same Constitution. But there, they had to have their own constitutional rights. And then Congress had the power at that time to decide what rights they were going to give their people. And of course, that's changed over the years. A lot of these things change over the years. And then they did make import duties legal. Import duties. So tariffs and things. All right? We then have the Jones Act 1917, which is going to give status to Puerto Rican U.S. citizenship. As I said, they're going to change that. Remove the tariff duties. And then they're going to elect their own legislator, governor to enforce their local laws. The one thing they can't do is vote for a presidential election. They can vote in primaries. They have a representative non-voting in Congress. So they're not necessarily an American, they're certainly not an American state. They have different things that take place. All right? And then, of course, here, like I said, can vote for Puerto Rico in the House. Or maybe they do have a vote in the House. I'll check on that. Not in the Senate, though. All right? So Panama. Now, Panama is kind of an interesting thing because of the Panama Canal. That's what everybody associates with Panama. So what happens, this is just all about trying to get the canal down in Panama. I'll just tell you a few things about it. First of all, it starts all the way back in 1850. The United States and Great Britain had this big idea, let's do a canal down in Latin America so you don't have to go around South America to get from the Atlantic to the Pacific, vice versa. That's the whole reason for the canal. South America is going to add days onto your trip. Whereas if we have that canal, you can go right between them. So what takes place is we're going down there, we're trying to take it over. You got this other guy that is involved trying to get that done. But the guy you really need to know too, Dr. Walter Reed, they had a terrible case of yellow fever down there. And people were not going to survive. He goes down there and figures out what to do. Do away with the standing water and what to rub on the mosquito bites and how to do away with mosquitoes. That's going to be the huge thing. And then this is the engineer, Colonel W. Guffels. And he's going to be the guy that really comes in and designs the Panama Canal. And basically now, one of the things that has to take place, Panama was not its own country. It's part of Colombia at the time. And we have to help Panama get its independence because Colombia didn't want to play ball with this canal deal. So we have to get Panama to become its own country, declare independence, and then we do a contract, an agreement, a treaty with them that we would have control of this 10-mile area known as the Panama Canal. So if you look at it, you go in here, and then we have to build. What they do is they have it where part of it is dug out, part of it is part of these lakes and things, and little contributaries and stuff. I'll show you a video on that later on. Teddy Roosevelt even goes down there. I'm sorry, come on. He goes down there and gets in one of the cranes. Begins in 1904. Roosevelt really wants it. Roosevelt thinks it's going to be a big thing. And it does. And of course, one of the big controversies is today we've given the rights to the Panama Canal back to the Panamanians. And we have to pay to go through it. But there is talk of having another canal built because this one is too old. It can't take all the tankers and stuff that we have today. So Roosevelt makes what's called the Roosevelt Corollary to the Monroe Doctrine. And basically what he's going to say is, and really he doesn't say much different, but what he's going to do is reinforce it. Reinforce it. He's going to say we're going to become the international police power. that because we have done this from way back when, and we've got some Europeans that still trying to have claims on it, you got to get out. You've mistreated the people. You're still in here. You're hurting the economy. You're not doing things the right way, and you got to get out. To exercise being the police of the time. All right? And of course, he comes up with the saying, speak softly, but carry a big stick, which means try to go through peaceful terms, but if you can't, bring out the big stick. And with him, the big stick was the Navy. Apologies to the Army, Air Force, Marines, and all that, but he felt, especially in this area of island hopping, imperialism, you had to have a big Navy. Ronald Reagan felt the same way. Ronald Reagan, before he really started trying to do away with communism in Russia in the 1970s and 80s, he builds up the military because he said, my demands would not have any backing without the military. So he builds up the military first, and then he goes to Russia and says, you're going to do this, this, and this, and this. If he didn't have the military to back it up, it would have never happened. So you need to know that. Speak softly, but carry a big stick. And then we're going to talk about China. The open door policy with China kind of goes with Japan. Probably could have put them together. But if you look at it, of course, we've talked about the Chinese Exclusion Act. Some people call it the Oriental Exclusion Act because people would start directing it at any Oriental/Asian person. And you look at how they are depicting the Asians of the time. Kind of devilish. They got a tail. They're like a bat. They got pointy ears, teeth with fangs, and all that stuff. And so it is not very good. And so those are the stereotypes that are taking place. Now, what's going to happen is we're going to go into China and we are going to work out what's called the open door policy. What we're worried about is a European country coming in and taking over the trade agreements with China and shutting everybody else out. So what we want to do is go in there and say anybody can come in and trade with China. It's the open door policy. Most of the countries agree with it, and if you look at it, what we have today is based early on this open door policy. So that's a pretty good thing. But there's a group in China that hates it. Keep in mind, China for hundreds of years had been what we call isolationist. They did not deal with the outside world very much. Hardly at all. If they did, it was other Asian countries. They did not deal with the Western Hemisphere nor the European countries. So they are mistrusting of those folks. And when we start to do these things and you start to see missionaries come over, American investment, business people, military people, there's a group called the Boxers who are not happy about that. They are, their full title is the Peaceful Harmonious Fist, but they're called the Boxer Rebellion. And what they do is over the course of days, a couple of months, they begin to kill, murder missionaries, businessmen. If there's a couple of military folks who are out by themselves, they would get them. And so it becomes a full-out battle with these rebellious people called the Boxer Rebellion. Now, of course, they're called the Boxer Rebellion because, as you know, they probably use they are using some type of martial arts. There are so many of them that, like, this group may use one and this group is using another one. So they are trying to use their hands. And so our military guys call them boxers because they're always wanting to fight with their hands. We, fortunately, come in with rifles and swords and things like that. Boxers are going to eventually get that as well. So the guy who comes up with the idea of the open door policy is Secretary of State John Hay. Not John Jay now, John Hay. And what it's going to do is going to give all the nations access to trade in China. So if you look at it, you've got all these European nations who are down ready to cut their little slice of China. And Uncle Sam is standing there saying, no, I've got this treaty, I've got this thing we all need to go by where everybody can trade. And that's going to make it successful for everybody. Guaranteed that China would not be taken over by any one foreign power. So if you look at it, what's going to eventually happen is that, and this had taken place even before this, where you had these different European countries that were monopolizing, for lack of a better word, different parts of China. And then we come in and say, no, you know, Russia should be able to do it with all of them. France should do it with all of them. Now, to be quite honest, the reason we want that is because we're late to the party. By the time we get there and start doing some of this, the Europeans have already made headrows into this. We feel that we're never going to get a foothold as long as these European countries have already done this. So it's a little self-serving, yes. So if you look, these are political cartoons that are associated with it. This one I've seen on test before. So it's kind of like a pie, and everyone there is cutting up. You got Catherine, you've got Japan, you got, this is the Chinese guy, you've got the Dutch over here, Russian, of course, German, and then I think that is Italian. And then if you look here, all right, these are the folks that are coming in. So the open door policy, China has opened the door, and you got all these different countries that are now coming in. If you look at it, even Japan did not have total trade agreements with China. It had a little bit from person to person, but not huge, okay? And then if you look here, Uncle Sam has opened the door, and he's blocking it open so that everybody can come in. So now we're going to start becoming what's called a Pacific power, because we're going to take over all these lands. You look, there's the United States, we got the Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, we don't even count Cuba at the time, Alaska up here, and then all these islands at some time come under American rule, some way or somehow. All right, so what's our new role? Well, we now have to be like the head of the family. We got to help these other folks out when they get in trouble. The Philippines is going to be invaded by Japan in World War II. So we leave, but then we have to come back. Midway is attacked by Japan. You saw the movie. Japan is attacked by Japan. Hawaii is attacked by Japan, Pearl Harbor. And we have to be the protectorate. We have to be the constable of the world. Constable is a police officer in England. And it's called the New Diplomacy, where we're going to come in and do that. So what we do today in world events is not new. It starts all the way back in the 1900s. So that's something you may want to put is some of these things here that we are still doing today. We got into it early on. Now, we still consider ourselves isolationist. We're going to talk about that after World War II. After World War I. We consider the world wars what makes us go back into being isolationist. All right? Roosevelt, talking about him a little bit, of course, progressive president. He's going to win the Nobel Peace Prize for coming up with the Treaty of Portsmouth in 1905 between Russia and Japan. They're fighting each other. The treaty's 1905, and he gets the Nobel Prize in 1906. And then, of course, we got to keep in mind the Great White Fleet. And Roosevelt, of course, is going to build that up as president, because he realized, especially being Assistant Secretary of the Navy, how important the Navy is going to be. And so, you just look. All these, that's coal-powered ships out there. The Navy needs you. Don't read American history, make it. All right? Now, Taft, of course, he comes in after Roosevelt. He wants to do things a tad bit different. He wants dollar diplomacy. He doesn't want Roosevelt, speak softly but carry a big stick. Taft believes, and we do this a little bit today, that if you improve the financial opportunities in these countries for American business, you allow private capital monies to go in, and including some U.S. money, then not only would it make them more stable, it would make them rely upon us. It was a great idea. We're going to do that right after World War II as well, to confront communism. It works better here because these countries are so poor. They need our money. They need business. So they're loving it. And they realize, okay, we got to put up with America a little bit. We got to let them kind of be the big daddies. Yeah, they do that. The problem we have now is we're doing that with some countries in the Middle East, and they don't hold up to their end of the bargain. You know, certainly when we killed Osama bin Laden, he was hiding out in Pakistan. We were giving the Pakistanis millions of dollars a year to be our friend. They knew where he was holding up at. And so, of course, that money got taken away from them. They were supposed to be telling us where this guy was. They did. But that's Taft's idea of dollar diplomacy. So once again, you can use this and analogize it with today. How our dollar diplomacy works today. Our State Department. All right? Down in Mexico. Tell you what, we're going to stop there. And I'll do another one with that.